The room was tense. You could almost hear the air crackle with anticipation. Every word spoken carried weight. Every document shown felt like a piece of a puzzle falling into place. Musk paused for a moment, letting the gravity of what he had just revealed sink in. He glanced around the room, his eyes scanning the faces of lawmakers, reporters, and aides. Some looked shocked. Others tried to hide their unease behind blank expressions. But no one could deny that something big was unfolding right before them. The young congresswoman who had asked about foreign policy decisions leaned forward again. Her voice was firm, but calm as she pressed further. "Can you explain," she began, "how these alleged deals impacted our relationships with other countries? Were allies involved? Enemies?" Musk nodded slowly. His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of intensity in his eyes. "It goes deeper than you think," he said. "Some of the transactions documented here weren't just financial, they were strategic. They influenced trade agreements, military partnerships, even intelligence sharing." He clicked on the remote control, bringing up another set of documents on the screen behind him. Charts, graphs, and highlighted text appeared, showing connections between various nations and key figures within the U.S. government. "This isn't speculation," Musk added. "These are records pulled directly from secure servers. Records that show how money flowed in exchange for influence, and how some of those influences may have compromised national security." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks while cameras flashed non-stop. The sheer scale of it all was staggering. One older congressman stood up, his face red with frustration. He pointed a finger at Musk, his voice booming across the chamber. "You're accusing people without evidence," he shouted. "This is reckless." Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he gestured toward the screen. "The evidence is right there," he replied evenly. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm presenting facts. If someone wants to dispute them, they can do so publicly, with proof." The congressman hesitated, then sank back into his seat, muttering under his breath. But the tension wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Another whistleblower stepped forward, a former diplomat this time. Their identity was concealed, their voice altered to protect them from retaliation. But their testimony hit hard. "I saw it happen," the whistleblower said softly, yet with unmistakable conviction. "Decisions were made not because they were right for the country, but because they benefited certain individuals, powerful individuals." They went on to describe secret meetings held in luxury hotels, private jets flying in wealthy donors, and late-night phone calls that bypassed official channels. It painted a picture of a system where power and money intertwined in ways most Americans couldn't imagine. As the hearing continued, the focus kept coming back to one name: Hillary Clinton. It wasn't just her role as a politician anymore. It was her connections, her network, the people she surrounded herself with, both during her time in office and after. Musk presented emails showing how decisions she supported aligned perfectly with the interests of major contributors. Decisions that, according to the whistleblowers, might have cost taxpayers billions. And then came the question everyone was waiting for. A seasoned journalist raised her hand, her voice cutting through the murmurs filling the room. "What about accountability?" she asked sharply. "If what you're saying is true, why hasn't anyone been held responsible for this?" Musk sighed deeply, looking genuinely weary for the first time that day. "That's the hardest part," he admitted. Institutions, designed to hold people accountable, often fail when faced with pressure from above. Laws get twisted, investigations stall, and eventually people forget, or worse, stop caring. His words hung heavy in the air. Outside, protests grew louder. Crowds gathered near the Capitol, holding signs and chanting slogans. Some demanded justice. Others called Musk a liar trying to manipulate public opinion. Social media feeds lit up with hashtags, debates, and accusations. Friends argued. Families split over the issue. It was chaos. But it was also democracy in action. Back inside, the hearing took a darker turn. A senator known for being tough on corruption stood up, slamming his fist against the table. "If we're Going to accuse someone of wrongdoing, he barked. We need names, dates, proof beyond doubt, otherwise this is nothing more than mudslinging. Musk didn't argue. Instead, he turned to the screen once more, pulling up a timeline of events. Each entry was backed by receipts, emails, bank statements, meeting logs. It was overwhelming, almost too much to process. Here's your proof, Musk said simply. Take it or leave it. The senator stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. For a moment, it seemed like he might challenge Musk further. But then, he sat down, shaking his head. By now, the hearing had gone on for hours. People were exhausted, emotionally drained. Yet no one wanted to leave. History was being made, and nobody wanted to miss a single second of it. Finally, a junior representative spoke up. She was quiet, reserved, but her question cut straight to the heart of the matter. What happens next? She asked. If everything you've shown us is true, what comes after today? Musk hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. That depends on all of you, he said, sweeping his gaze across the room. This isn't my fight, it's yours. Yours and the American people's. I've done my part by bringing this information to light. Now it's up to Congress, the courts, and the voters to decide what to do with it. His answer sent ripples through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others frowned, clearly dissatisfied. After all, exposing corruption was one thing, but fixing it, that was an entirely different challenge. As the hearing wrapped up, Musk stepped away from the podium. He didn't look triumphant. If anything, he seemed burdened, as if carrying the weight of what he'd unleashed. Reporters swarmed him, shouting questions faster than he could answer. Cameras flashed endlessly. But Musk ignored them, walking out of the room with his team close behind. Meanwhile, outside, the protests showed no sign of slowing down. Supporters cheered, calling Musk a hero. Critics jeered, accusing him of playing games with politics. TV pundits debated endlessly, dissecting every detail of the hearing. Social media exploded with memes, conspiracy theories, and heated arguments. And somewhere far away, Hilary Clinton watched silently. She hadn't issued a statement yet. No press release, no interview, no tweet. Just silence. But the world knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because whether you believed Musk or doubted him, one thing was clear. The genie was out of the bottle. Secrets once buried were now exposed, and the ripple effects would be felt for years to come. The next morning, the entire nation woke up to headlines screaming louder than ever before. Newspapers, TV shows, podcasts. Every platform was buzzing with talk about what had happened in Congress. Social media timelines were flooded with clips, memes, and debates. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. For some, it was a wake-up call. For others, it was confirmation of suspicions they'd harbored for years. And for a few, it was just another chapter in the endless saga of politics, a game where everyone played dirty but no one got caught. But this time, things felt different. This time, there was proof. Back at the Capitol, lawmakers were scrambling. The hearing might have ended, but the fallout was only beginning. Offices buzzed with hushed conversations as aides worked overtime to draft statements, analyze documents, and prepare for what was sure to be a firestorm of public outrage. One senior senator called an emergency meeting behind closed doors. The room was packed. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle sat together, their usual animosity replaced by shared unease. We need to figure out how to handle this, the senator said, pacing back and forth. If we don't address it properly, it's going to blow up in our faces. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical, arms crossed tightly over their chests. What exactly are we supposed to do? One congressman asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Even if half of what Musk claims is true, it implicates people at every level, including us. That comment hung heavy in the air. No one wanted to admit it, but they all knew he was right. If the allegations were accurate, then the corruption ran deep. So deep that untangling it might tear apart the very fabric of trust between the government and the people. Meanwhile, outside the halls of power, ordinary citizens were grappling with their own emotions. In coffee shops, living rooms, and workplaces, people gathered around screens watching replays of the hearing. Conversations turned heated, friendships strained, families divided. At a diner in a small town, two friends argued over breakfast. "You're telling me you believe everything that guy says?" one of them asked, pointing at the TV screen showing Musk's testimony. "He's a billionaire with his own agenda. Why should we trust him?" The other friend shook her head firmly. "It doesn't matter who's saying it," she replied. "What matters is the evidence. You saw those emails, those bank records. That's not something you can just make up." Their disagreement mirrored what was happening across the country. Some saw Musk as a crusader for truth, willing to risk everything to expose wrongdoing. Others viewed him as a self-serving opportunist, using his wealth and influence to stir the pot. And then there were those who didn't know what to think. In a quiet apartment in Chicago, an elderly woman sat alone, staring at her laptop. She scrolled through article after article, trying to piece together the truth. Her hands trembled slightly as she read quotes from whistleblowers, examined leaked documents, and listened to sound bites from the hearing. "I've lived through so many scandals," she muttered to herself. "Watergate, Iran-Contra, Enron. But this feels bigger, scarier." She wasn't wrong. What made this situation unique wasn't just the scale. It was the way it touched every aspect of life. Politics, business, media, technology. All interconnected in ways that left people feeling powerless. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Law enforcement agencies began launching investigations. Federal agents combed through the data Musk had provided, verifying each detail meticulously. Reporters dug deeper, uncovering even more connections and contradictions. Legal experts debated whether charges could be filed, and if so, against whom. But amidst all the chaos, one question lingered. Where was Hillary Clinton? Her silence had become deafening. While others rushed to defend themselves or distance themselves from the accusations, she remained eerily quiet. No interviews, no press conferences, not even a tweet. Rumors swirled. Some claimed she was preparing a legal defense. Others whispered that she was negotiating deals behind the scenes. A few conspiracy theories suggested she had already fled the country. None of it was confirmed. Instead, her team released a brief statement late one evening. It was vague, carefully worded, and offered little substance. While we respect the importance of transparency and accountability, the statement read, we must also recognize the dangers of baseless accusations and misinformation. We urge calm and caution as these matters are thoroughly reviewed. It did little to quell the growing storm. Protests continued nationwide. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., crowds filled the streets, chanting slogans and demanding answers. Some rallies were peaceful, others turned chaotic as tensions boiled over. Police officers stood guard, ready to intervene if needed. On social media, hashtags trended for days. Expose the truth. Hold them accountable. Justice for all. Each post added fuel to the fire, amplifying voices from every corner of society, and yet despite the noise, progress seemed slow. Congress struggled to find common ground. Hearings resumed, but they were messy, disjointed affairs. Lawmakers argued over procedure, semantics, and jurisdiction. Whistleblowers faced intense scrutiny, their credibility questioned at every turn. Meanwhile, Musk stayed mostly out of the spotlight, letting his team handle the follow-ups while he focused on his companies. But even he couldn't escape the backlash entirely. Critics accused him of grandstanding, of using the controversy to distract from his own controversies. Supporters defended him fiercely, praising his courage and determination. Late-night comedians joked about the absurdity of it all, turning the drama into punchlines. Through it all, one thing became clear. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about rebuilding trust, about proving that democracy still worked, that justice could prevail, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. And somewhere along the way, people started realizing something else. They weren't powerless after. Sure, the system was flawed. Sure, the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time they had information, they had proof, and they had each other. Across the country, grassroots movements sprang up overnight. Neighbors organized meetings, activists planned campaigns, students held rallies on college campuses. Even politicians who had once avoided controversy found themselves forced to take sides. It was messy, it was chaotic, but it was real. And as the weeks turned into months, the momentum kept building. Because whether you loved Musk or hated him, whether you believed the allegations or dismissed them, one undeniable truth emerged. The genie was out of the bottle and there was no putting it back. The scandal wasn't just a headline anymore, it had seeped into everyday life. It wasn't something people read about and forgot. It was shaping how they thought, talked, and acted. In living rooms, classrooms, and workplaces, conversations revolved around one question: what happens when trust is broken? For Maria, a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet, the scandal hit close to home. She sat at her kitchen table late one night, scrolling through news articles on her phone. The glow of the screen lit up her tired face as she read about billions of dollars being funneled into secret deals. Deals that might have funded schools, hospitals, or programs to help families like hers, but didn't. It's not fair, she whispered to herself, shaking her head. How can they sit there and act like nothing's wrong? Like we don't matter? Maria wasn't alone. Across the country, millions of ordinary people felt the same way. They weren't politicians or billionaires, they were teachers, nurses, factory workers, and small business owners. People who played by the rules but saw those rules bent or broken for the rich and powerful. In a small town in Ohio, a group of neighbors gathered at a local church hall. They called themselves Voices for Change. Every Thursday evening, they met to discuss what they could do to hold leaders accountable. At first, it was just 5 or 6 people sitting around folding chairs, sipping coffee from styrofoam cups. But word spread quickly and soon the room was packed. We're not experts, one man said during one of their meetings. We don't know all the legal stuff or how Congress works, but we know right from wrong. And this feels wrong. The group nodded in agreement. Together, they brainstormed ideas, writing letters to lawmakers, organizing protests, even starting petitions online. Some members admitted they'd never been politically active before, but now they felt compelled to act. It's like we've woken up, another woman said. For years we've been told to stay quiet, to let the experts handle things, but look where that got us. Her words resonated with everyone in the room. There was a sense of empowerment, a realization that change didn't always come from the top. Sometimes it started with ordinary people deciding they'd had enough. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the pressure on lawmakers was mounting. Investigations dragged on, uncovering more details with each passing week. Whistleblowers continued to come forward, some risking everything to speak out. Each revelation added another layer of complexity to an already tangled web. One day, a new piece of evidence surfaced, a recording. It wasn't clear who had made it or how it had been obtained, but its content sent shockwaves through the political world. The voice on the tape was unmistakable. Calm, confident, and calculating, it outlined a plan to shift public opinion using media manipulation and backdoor negotiations. The speaker didn't name names directly, but the implications were clear. Reporters pounced on the story, dissecting every word. Analysts debated whether the recording was authentic or fabricated. Lawyers argued over its admissibility in court. Meanwhile, the public listened and judged. This changes everything, one TV pundit declared during a heated panel discussion. If this is real, it proves that decisions affecting millions of lives were made not based on facts or ethics, but on convenience and greed. Not everyone agreed. Critics dismissed the recording as hearsay, accusing Musk and his team of planting fake evidence to fuel hysteria. Supporters countered that skepticism was exactly what the guilty wanted, to create doubt and delay justice. Amidst the chaos, one junior congressman decided to take a stand. He was young, idealistic, and relatively unknown, but he had a fire, in his belly that couldn't be ignored. During a televised interview, he looked straight into the camera and spoke directly to the American people. "I'm not here to tell you what to think," he said. "I'm here to remind you that you have power. You vote. You protest. You demand answers. Don't let anyone silence you. Not politicians, not corporations, not billionaires. Hold them all accountable." His words struck a chord. Clips of the interview went viral, shared by millions across social media. For many, it was a rallying cry, a reminder that democracy only worked if people participated, but not everyone was inspired. Some saw the congressman's speech as naive, even reckless. They warned that stirring up anger without offering solutions would only lead to more division. "Passion isn't enough," one critic wrote in an op-ed. "We need concrete plans, not empty slogans. Otherwise, we risk tearing ourselves apart." The debate raged on, polarizing communities and testing relationships. Families argued over dinner tables. Friends blocked each other on social media. Even churches found themselves divided, with pastors struggling to maintain unity among their congregations. Through it all, Hillary Clinton remained silent. Her absence was conspicuous, almost eerie. While others scrambled to defend themselves or distance themselves from the accusations, she stayed out of sight, letting her lawyers handle the fallout. Rumors swirled about her next move. Would she issue a formal statement? Appear on national television? Sue Musk for defamation? No one knew. What was clear, however, was that her legacy was under attack. Everything she had worked for, her career, her achievements, her reputation, was being questioned. For some, it was long overdue. For others, it felt like a witch hunt. Back in California, Musk tried to focus on his businesses. Tesla factories hummed with activity, SpaceX rockets soared into the sky, and Neuralink experiments pushed the boundaries of science. But even he couldn't escape the shadow of the scandal. Reporters camped outside his headquarters, hounding him for updates. Employees whispered about the toll it was taking on him, both mentally and physically. Late at night, he often retreated to his office, staring at walls covered in notes, charts, and timelines. Was it worth it? That was the question haunting him. Had exposing the truth made a difference? Or had it only deepened the divide? He didn't have an answer. But somewhere along the way, he realized something important. It wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger than any one person. Bigger than politics, money, or power. It was about restoring faith in a system that had lost its way. And so, despite the backlash, the criticism, and the sheer exhaustion, he kept going. Because giving up wasn't an option. Across the nation, people began to notice subtle shifts. Politicians started paying attention to grassroots movements. Journalists dug deeper into corruption cases. Activists organized rallies that drew thousands. Slowly but surely, cracks appeared in the walls of secrecy and privilege. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was progress. In a small community, center in Texas, a group of teenagers gathered to brainstorm ways to get involved. They weren't old enough to vote yet, but they refused to sit idly by. Using social media, they launched campaigns to educate their peers about civic engagement. Their slogan? Your voice matters. At a university in Massachusetts, students held a mock trial, debating the ethics of whistleblowing versus privacy rights. Professors encouraged open dialogue, challenging students to think critically about power dynamics. One student summed it up perfectly during a class discussion. "This isn't just about catching bad guys," she said. "It's about building a better future for everyone." Her professor smiled, nodding approvingly. "Exactly," he replied. "Accountability is the foundation of trust. Without it, nothing else matters." As weeks turned into months, the movement gained momentum. It wasn't led by any one person or organization. It was decentralized, organic, and driven by passion. People from all walks of life came together, united by a shared desire for transparency and fairness. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the fight wasn't over. Not yet, because when trust is broken, rebuilding it takes time, patience, effort, and most importantly, courage. the kind that comes from believing in something greater than yourself. The scandal had become more than just a political drama. It was now a mirror reflecting the cracks in society. People saw themselves in it, their struggles, their hopes, and their fears. It wasn't just about Hillary Clinton or Elon Musk anymore. It was about what kind of world they wanted to live in. For Maria, the single mother from Ohio, the scandal had awakened something inside her, a determination she hadn't felt in years. She started attending local protests, holding up signs that read, "Truth over power." At first, she kept to the edges of the crowd, unsure of herself. But as weeks went by, she found her voice. One chilly Saturday morning, standing on a street corner with a megaphone in hand, Maria spoke to a group of strangers who had gathered around her. "I'm not rich," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I don't have connections or influence. All I have is my vote and my belief that things can be better. That's why I'm here today, because if we don't fight for justice, no one else will." Her words resonated with the crowd. Some nodded silently, others cheered. A young man filmed her speech on his phone and posted it online. By the end of the day, thousands had watched it. For Maria, it was surreal. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone celebrated. But she realized something important. Her story mattered. Across the country, similar moments were happening. In small towns and big cities alike, ordinary people stepped forward, sharing their frustrations and dreams. They weren't waiting for someone else to fix things, they were doing it themselves. In Detroit, a retired teacher named Robert organized a series of town hall meetings. He invited local leaders, activists, and even a few skeptical politicians to join the conversation. The goal wasn't to point fingers, but to find solutions. "We've spent too much time yelling at each other," Robert told the crowd during one meeting. "Now it's time to listen, to work together, because unless we do, nothing will change." His approach caught on. Other communities followed suit, hosting their own discussions and workshops. Slowly but surely, these grassroots efforts began to shape public opinion. People stopped seeing the scandal as a distant issue and started viewing it as something personal, something they could influence. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the tension reached a boiling point. Investigations uncovered new evidence almost daily, each revelation more explosive than the last. Whistleblowers continued to come forward, risking careers and reputations to expose wrongdoing. Some faced backlash, threats, smear campaigns, even lawsuits, but most refused to back down. One whistleblower, a former tech analyst, appeared on national television wearing a disguise to protect their identity. Their testimony sent shockwaves through the nation. "What I'm about to say isn't easy," they began, their voice shaking slightly. "But it's the truth. For years, powerful individuals manipulated algorithms to control what you see, hear, and believe. They decided which stories mattered and which didn't. And when people tried to speak out, they were silenced. The audience listened intently, many visibly shaken. Hosts pressed the whistleblower for details, asking how widespread the manipulation was and who was responsible. The answers weren't always clear, but one thing was undeniable: the system was broken. As the scandal grew, so did the divide. Supporters of Musk praised him as a hero, someone willing to risk everything to uncover the truth. Critics accused him of playing politics, using the controversy to further his own agenda. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags trending for hours before being replaced by new ones. Late-night comedians joked about the absurdity of it all, turning the drama into punchlines. One comedian quipped, "At this rate, we'll need a flowchart just to keep track of who's accusing who." But beneath the jokes and memes, there was a growing sense of unease. People were tired, not just of corruption, but of feeling powerless. Every headline, every tweet, every breaking news alert reminded them of how much was at stake. And then came the moment that changed everything. It happened during a congressional hearing, one of dozens held over the past months. A junior congressman, known for his fiery speeches and unorthodox methods, stood up and addressed the room. "We've spent months debating procedures and technicalities," he said, slamming his fist against the table. But enough is enough. The American people deserve answers. Real answers. Not excuses. Not delays. He turned toward the panel of witnesses, his eyes locking onto one of the whistleblowers. "Tell us everything," he demanded. No holds. Barred. No fear. Just the truth. The whistleblower hesitated, glancing nervously at their legal team. Then, taking a deep breath, they began to speak. What followed was a cascade of revelations, details about secret meetings, undisclosed donations, and covert operations designed to sway elections and silence dissent. Each word sent ripples through the room, leaving lawmakers stunned and reporters scrambling to document every detail. By the time the session ended, the entire nation was talking about it. News anchors struggled to summarize the sheer volume of information. Analysts debated its implications late into the night. Social media erupted with reactions ranging from outrage to disbelief. But amidst the chaos, one question lingered. What would happen next? Lawmakers called for emergency sessions. Legal experts weighed in on whether charges could be filed. Activists urged the public to stay engaged, warning that the fight was far from over. And yet, despite the uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope. People were waking up, not just to the scandal, but to their own power. They were organizing, protesting, and demanding accountability. Politicians who had once ignored them were now forced to listen. Journalists who had overlooked corruption were digging deeper than ever before. Even those who remained skeptical couldn't deny the impact. Conversations that had once been dismissed as conspiracy theories were now front-page news. Issues that had been swept under the rug were finally being addressed. In New York City, a group of artists created a mural depicting the scandal. It showed a cracked mirror, with faces of ordinary people reflected in the shards. Above it, bold letters spelled out a simple message: "The truth will set us free." Tourists stopped to take photos, locals paused to reflect, and passers-by shared their thoughts on social media. The mural became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, art and activism could inspire change. Back in California, Musk watched the developments unfold from afar. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, accusations, and moments of doubt. But he also knew something else. The genie was out of the bottle, and it wasn't going back. For the first time in months, he allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't triumph, far from it, but it was progress. And sometimes that was enough. Across the nation, people kept fighting. They didn't agree on everything. In fact, they often disagreed passionately. But they shared one common goal: a better future. A future where trust wasn't a luxury but a right. Where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of a few but distributed among many. And where justice wasn't an ideal but a reality. The journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead. Difficult decisions, hard truths, and sacrifices. But one thing was certain: the movement had begun, and it wasn't stopping anytime soon. Months had passed since the scandal first erupted, but its echoes still reverberated across the nation. What began as a single hearing had grown into something much larger, a reckoning that forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about power, accountability, and justice. And though the headlines had slowed, the changes it sparked were only beginning to take root. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers finally reached a breaking point. Investigations dragged on for weeks, each day uncovering more evidence, more connections, and more questions. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, so much so that even seasoned politicians struggled to keep up. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear: ignoring the problem was no longer an option. A bipartisan committee emerged, tasked with addressing the allegations head-on. For once, Democrats and Republicans set aside their differences, united by a shared sense of urgency. They knew the stakes were high, not just for themselves, but for the future of democracy itself. "We can't let this moment pass us by," one senior senator declared during a press conference. "If we fail to act, we risk losing the trust of the American people forever." Their plan was ambitious: It included sweeping reforms aimed at increasing transparency, strengthening whistleblower protections, and holding powerful figures accountable. Some called it unrealistic, others labeled it groundbreaking, but everyone agreed it was necessary. Meanwhile, outside the halls of power, ordinary citizens kept pushing forward. Grassroots movements continued to grow, fueled by a newfound determination to make their voices heard. From small towns to major cities, people organized rallies, lobbied lawmakers, and demanded action. Maria, the single mother from Ohio, became a local leader in her community. She started a blog documenting her journey, sharing stories of resilience and hope. Her posts resonated with readers, inspiring them to get involved in their own neighborhoods. Before long, she was invited to speak at conferences and panels, representing the voice of everyday Americans. "I never thought I'd be here," she admitted during one event, standing behind a podium with tears in her eyes. "But if someone like me can make a difference, anyone can. All it takes is courage and a belief that change is possible." Her words struck a chord with audiences, reminding them that heroes didn't always wear capes or hold titles. Sometimes, they were just regular people who refused to give up. As the months went by, cracks began to form in the walls of secrecy that had protected the powerful for so long. High-profile figures found themselves under scrutiny, forced to answer for their actions. Some resigned quietly, disappearing from public life. Others fought back, hiring teams of lawyers to defend their reputations. But none escaped unscathed. Hilary Clinton, whose name had loomed large over the entire scandal, eventually broke her silence. In a carefully crafted statement, she denied any wrongdoing but acknowledged the need for reform. "This has been a difficult time for all of us," she wrote. "While I stand by my record, I recognize that trust must be earned, not assumed. Moving forward, I am committed to supporting efforts to restore transparency and accountability in our institutions." The response was mixed. Some praised her willingness to engage, while others dismissed her words as too little, too late. Either way, the focus had shifted. It wasn't about individuals anymore. It was about systems. About creating structures that prevented abuse rather than enabling it. Elon Musk, meanwhile, stepped back from the spotlight. He hadn't intended to become the face of the movement, but his role in exposing the scandal had cemented his place in history. Though critics continued to accuse him of ulterior motives, supporters hailed him as a catalyst for change. "I didn't do this for recognition," he said during a rare interview. "I did it because it needed to be done. If anything, I hope people realize they don't need a billionaire to fight for them. They have the power themselves." His humility surprised many, but it also reinforced a key lesson. True progress came from collective effort, not individual heroics. Musk's actions may have ignited the spark, but it was ordinary people who fanned the flames. Across the country, communities began to heal. Conversations that had once divided neighbors now brought them closer together. People learned to listen, to truly hear each other's perspectives instead of rushing to judgment. It wasn't easy, and disagreements still flared occasionally, but the tone had shifted. There was less anger, more empathy. In Detroit, Robert, the retired teacher, saw his town hall meetings evolve into something greater. Local leaders implemented some of the ideas discussed, from improving access to healthcare to expanding educational opportunities. Residents took pride in what they had accomplished, realizing that change started at home. "It's not perfect," Robert admitted during a follow-up meeting, "but it's a start. And sometimes a start is all you need." Artists, writers, and musicians played their part too, using their platforms to inspire and unite. Murals popped up in cities nationwide, depicting themes of justice, resilience, and hope. Songs written about the movement climbed the charts, becoming anthems for a new generation. Even filmmakers began working on documentaries, capturing the raw emotion of those turbulent months. Back in New York City, the mural created earlier in the scandal remained a popular destination. Tour guides included it in their routes, explaining its significance to visitors. Children posed for photos in front of it, smiling innocently as their parents snapped pictures. It served as a reminder that even in dark times, creativity could light the way. By the end of the year, Polls showed a dramatic shift in public sentiment. Trust in government remained low, but faith in grassroots activism soared. People felt empowered, knowing they had the ability to shape the world around them. Politicians noticed the change, tailoring their campaigns to reflect the values of transparency and accountability. And yet, despite the progress, challenges remained. Corruption hadn't disappeared overnight, nor had inequality or injustice. The road ahead would be long and difficult, requiring constant vigilance and effort. But for the first time in years, there was optimism. At a national summit held to celebrate the movement's achievements, speakers reflected on how far they had come and how far they still had to go. "This isn't the end," one activist said during her speech. "It's the beginning. A chance to build something better, something stronger, something fairer." Her words drew applause, echoing through the packed auditorium. Attendees rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, united by a shared vision of the future. Outside, fireworks lit up the night sky, painting it with bursts of color. Families gathered to watch, pointing out shapes in the explosions. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the hum of conversation. For a brief moment, it felt like anything was possible, because deep down, everyone understood the truth. The real power lay not in wealth or influence, but in unity. In standing together, speaking out, and refusing to stay silent. The scandal had exposed flaws, yes, but it had also revealed strength. Strength in numbers, strength in conviction, strength in hope. And as the fireworks faded, leaving behind trails of smoke drifting lazily into the stars, one thing was certain. The fight wasn't over, but neither was the dream.